Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for coming here this morning. There's a lot of places you could be this morning, but you are all here today, and I think that's very important. I don't know if in 2015 or 14 everybody was as involved, but I know after what happened in 2016, I couldn't sit around anymore and I had to get involved, which is what I did after I left the Marine Corps. If you don't know already, my name is Edwin Santana. This is the closest event I've been to so far. I live 5 minutes down the road, right here in Stafford. With my wife, who's an active duty Marine, and my two kids, Edwin Santana III and Valerie Jean. Between dealing with two kids under 2 and being a Marine, Rob Whitman doesn't intimidate me. And the challenge that we face doesn't scare me, because Marines, we face some pretty heavy challenges. I know there's some Marines in the room today. To make sure I had it down pat, the first thing I started doing when I filed to run in January 2017 was go around the district and open my ears to start listening to the issues and concerns that the people have. And started talking to the people of the district, and then they told me what was important to them, and I realized that that's what matters. I have some stuff that's important to me. I mean, most of that aligns with what folks want, but to be a representative, you have to listen and create the idea of represent, and that's something that Rob Whitman is not doing right now. He's proven that he is afraid of us. I know some people have been lucky enough to get one of his telephone town hall phone calls, but I haven't. So real quick about what I want to accomplish. These are some of the ideas that I've picked up since I've been going around the district, what I found is important to people. The top of that list for me is reforming our healthcare system, and I think the best way to do that is through single payer. I'm glad that all the candidates up on the stage have finally acknowledged that. I think it is extremely important, and it's something I've advocated for since January of last year. If you look at single payer healthcare, most people ask, how are we going to pay for that? How can we possibly afford to insure all 330 odd million people in this country? Well, we already spend $3.4 trillion doing that now, and the highest nonpartisan estimate is $2.8 trillion. With that $600 billion in savings, we can use to apply towards all the other things that I want to do that I'm about to list off right now. So I think it's extremely important. We live in a country right now where you don't maximize health outcomes for people, which sounds like it would be common sense. The healthcare system we have now is designed to maximize the bottom line for insurance companies, and we absolutely need to do something about that. The Affordable Care Act is a great step in the right direction, but I think any candidates and new Democrats elected in 2018, we need to take it across the goal line, to use a football metaphor. I'm a proud product of public schools. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have a public school system that gave me an education that set me up for the opportunities later on in life. And I want to continue to make sure that my kids, your grandchildren all have those same opportunities. Because a public education is the great equalizer in this country. No matter where you're from, it shouldn't matter what zip code you live in, your children should be entitled to a great education, because you never know what they're going to be able to accomplish if they have that education and then they meet that opportunity someday, which I was fortunate enough to get. The Marine Corps found me when I was in high school, and I was able to earn a scholarship to go to school 100% free at Maine Maritime Academy. I paid that off by serving my country in the Marine Corps, but luckily that's something that I planned on doing anyway. The next thing I think is extremely important is to make sure we build an economy that works for all Americans no matter where they live. I'm from Thorndike, Maine, and unfortunately I will never go back to Thorndike, Maine, because there's just nothing there for me or for my kids. There's no good job opportunities there, and that's unfortunate, because I love the place I grew up, and I know a lot of people love the place that they go up, but there's just not something there for them. And thinking about my children having to move away from where they live now because they don't have opportunities, I think there's a bunch of ways that we can help build that economy for all Americans. I hope we get to go into more detail on that later on in the debate, but I think that that's extremely important. Protecting the local environment. When I went and spoke to different committees, that's something that people always talk about. Not only climate change on a large scale, but more local issues that are nonpartisan once you talk to folks about it. Fracking in the Taylorsville Basin, the pollution of the Rappahannock. Name all the different kind of pipelines that they want to run through our Commonwealth. All those issues are local issues, which if we can do something to help improve them, make them better, lo and behold, it also does great things for the global climate as well. So that's an extremely important issue that our generation of newly elected officials are going to have to solve. Broadband internet. The first Democratic committee meeting that I went to before we talked about Donald Trump, before we talked about the election, or Russia or any of that. They spent about 30 to 45 minutes talking about their lack of broadband internet access and why it was so important. I heard stories about kids who couldn't do their homework. Their parents had to drive them to McDonald's to sit in the parking lot so they could do their homework after hours. I've talked to doctors whose patients can't access their medical records online because they don't have internet. And if you ask some people in 2017 or 2018 if we'd be having issues with broadband internet, you'd say no, it's 2018, but that's frankly not true, and it's something that we need to address. If you look at how we were able to push power into every single home in the 20th century, we need to take that and apply those same methodologies to broadband internet in the 21st century. We need to do something to stop the sexual assault epidemic in this country, as well as do something to combat domestic violence. My campaign decided that we need to step up and do something. I have a platform. Right now it is a small platform, but I want to use that platform to do some good, and we've already drafted some legislation that we will propose immediately when going into Congress. Real quick, since everybody's touched on it, I think it's extremely important. We absolutely have to do something to stop the gun violence epidemic as well. John and I are veterans. We've carried those weapons of war, and we know exactly what they're designed to do. Those weapons belong in the hands of men and women defending our country, not in the hands of 18 and 19-year-old disaffected youth. Thank you so much, and I look forward to answering your questions. In the Marine Corps, we describe two different types of courage. There's physical courage and moral courage. Physical courage, I am certain everybody here in this room has. I know everybody in here for a loved one, whether it's a husband, a wife, a son, or a daughter, somebody that they love, they would lay down their life to protect them. If something were to happen in this room right now, I am confident that everybody in the room has that kind of courage, but that's not what you're talking about. That's not the kind of courage that we demand of our elected representatives. We demand more moral courage from them. The ability to do the right thing, like John said, the harder right when it's easier to do wrong. And that's something that I've been working on my entire life. And since I was 18, training to become a Marine and as a Marine Corps officer. The other candidates up here on the stage have heard me say, are there any Marine Corps officers in the room? Any, okay.
Hoorah.
So, hoorah, of OCS is, and it's Ductus Exemplo, and that means to lead by example. And that's something that I have been doing my entire life, and I intend to do when I get into Congress as well. Not doing anything that I wouldn't expect or want my constituents to do as well. That's something that my Marines have demanded of me, and that's something that I've demanded of myself my entire adulthood, and I plan to do the same thing, whether it's as your representative in Congress or as a father to my children. Only do things that they would be honored to see me do as well. You need to get your mind and your body right. But for too long, I mean, the Affordable Care Act did a lot of good work for that, requiring some form of parity between like physical health insurance and also being able to get mental health. The military actually did a great job of that. I was able to get all the kinds of services I need for myself and my family. And going off of that model, I want to see the same thing for a lot of other people. The single-payer healthcare system that I want would also include those things, because again, it needs to be a holistic approach. You could have a healthy body and a sick mind, and then we need to be able to treat both. Tying that into criminal justice reform, it's unfortunate that for a lot of people, the only mental health care that they will get is after they're in the criminal justice system. And somebody can fact check me on this, but I know that prisons and the criminal justice system are some of the biggest providers of mental health care in this country, unfortunately. We need to help them first. And I think a lot of that is at the state level, but we can do our part federally by ensuring that everybody can get access to quality health care and quality mental health care. We need to stop treating the two differently. As far as what I would do for criminal justice reform, we need to stop using it as a system of control. If you look at slavery in this country, it just transitioned to the criminal justice system, and it's something that is disproportionately used for black and brown people. We had the discussion last forum about marijuana use. That the war on drugs is just an example of that. For criminal justice reform, I think for a lot of things we need to make them law and stop relying on regulations. Regulations can be overturned when we go from a great president like Barack Obama to somebody like Donald Trump. We need to start passing those things into law. We need to solidify them so it's not as easy to take them away once we get into a new administration. the Marine in me comes out and I get a lot more profane, so I'll try and keep it appropriate. But along those same lines, I am unapologetically progressive. I haven't hid that from day one, but one thing that the Marine Corps taught me is to have some bearing. So I can have my ideas, I can communicate them to folks. But I've been able to do so in a way that allows us to have a conversation. I use this example a lot, but my job in the Marine Corps is to bring together a diverse group of folks from many different backgrounds. I mean, half the Marines are from Texas and the other half are from California. And politically, those are about as far away as you can get. But I had to bring those folks together to accomplish very difficult tasks, and I think that that's the challenge that the next congressman is going to have to do. And I don't think we win by running away from who we are. This is a Democratic primary, and I'm proud to be in it. And everybody that I talk to, I make sure that they know that. But that doesn't mean that we don't continue to try and expand the tent. I'm going to make an effort. We all need to try and bring more folks in, but we absolutely don't compromise who we are, what we are, or our values to try and do so. You reach out, and at the end of the day, you say thank you, and you carry on. I can't win every vote, and like Ryan said, it's not going to be a shutout. We should try, but we don't compromise our values in doing so. If you look at Ed Gillespie, he can tout that he got more votes than any other Republican gubernatorial candidate before him. Ralph Northam got a lot more, and that's the example that we need to follow here in the state. There are enough Democrats to turn out throughout this district for any one of us up here to win, and that's what we need to be trying to do. But hey, I'd be honored if some Trump supporters were inspired by my message, decided to come over and vote for me, but I'm working very hard to get my message out there, and I think that the issues I want to run on, healthcare, education, the economy, broadband, internet, protecting the environment and bringing an end to sexual assault and sexual violence, I think those are all nonpartisan issues, and I try my best to communicate that the best I can, and I think that that's a message that people will agree with as well. So again, thank you. One last thing, I apologize, I wanted to add this on to the criminal justice reform. I think one thing we absolutely need to do, there should not be a for-profit industry. We need to get rid of that. There should be a supply and demand for prisoners in this country. To touch the livable wage part, I'm going to paraphrase FDR in his defense of the minimum wage, and he says that any company that relies on a subpar livable wage in this country does not deserve to exist. So the argument now that the minimum wage shouldn't be there to support your family, blah, 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 that it should be for 15-year-olds to get their first job, simply not true. It was designed with the intent that any man or woman could live and support their family in dignity, and we need to get back to that idea. Moving on to parity between the Department of Education and the Department of Defense. Just look at how we fund the two. The Department of Defense has a budget of $600 billion, and that's going up. And the Department of Education has a budget of $70 billion. So you can see where we decide to put our priorities. One thing I think that speaks directly to your question is we need to stop relying so much on property taxes to fund schools, because lo and behold, if you have people from a poor community, the schools are going to be funded in the same way. I said at the beginning that I think that public education is the great equalizer in this country. Part of my plan, and I think is extremely important, invest in early childhood development. So that way you don't have kids coming in unequal into the education system. I think early childhood development is like retirement. You invest in our children early, you invest in them heavily, and you have better results at the end. We need to start treating our education system like we do retirement. Invest early, invest heavily, invest throughout their life, and you'll see what you get on the back end. Great question, Clayton. First and foremost, I do not think that access to healthcare should be tied to your job, any job. The Constitution says to provide for the common defense and mutual welfare. It doesn't say that your local flower shop should also have to provide healthcare for folks. I think that that is absolutely a job that the government should be doing, access to healthcare through a single payer system. And again, I'm thrilled now that all the candidates are advocating for that, because I think it is the best solution to deal with healthcare in this country. Now, specifically for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and I use the Jobs Act in quotes because it didn't do really anything to address that. We see the token bonuses and the token things like that. You don't hear a lot of companies talking about how they're going to raise wages for their company, because a one-time $1,000 bonus is not the same as if you gave all of your employees a $1 pay raise. salary. There's 2,080 hours in a year if you're working 40 hours a week. So even a $1 pay raise would be more than a $1,000 bonus that you got. So while that's great, companies can absolutely be doing more with the giveaway that they've gotten. And to address that specifically, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act is nothing more than borrowing from the future of my kids, your grandchildren, to pay off corporate donors right now and GOP donors. That's all it is. Stealing from their future to pay off folks who don't need it now. And I think that that's appalling, frankly. They could have taken the opportunity with a tax bill. I think first and foremost, Democrats need to steal back the narrative on taxes. Ryan just listed off all the great ways that we use taxes in this country, whether it's for public schools, public health, public roads. Those are all great things that we all know are very important. And we have to stand up and fight for those things. You see now with Donald Trump's great infrastructure bill, what's he want to do? Privatize everything. He wants to take that away from the public so that way some private company can take that, jack up the toll roads, and you can send thousands of dollars each year to Australia, like John pointed out earlier. We have to take that narrative back. Nobody wants to pay them, but when you see the benefit that you get, I mean, look at some of these Scandinavian countries that have some of the highest taxes in the world. People aren't upset because you know with those taxes you get a great public education, you get quality health care, and you know that the government is using that money wisely. That's not the narrative we have in this country. It's a race to the bottom, a race to get rid of the social safety net, and that's something that we absolutely have to stop. I don't think it's a coincidence you see Donald Trump talking about the $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. And again, I use that in quotes too because it doesn't come anywhere near that in actual federal spending. How ironic is it that just over a month ago, they passed a tax cut that gives a $1.5 trillion deficit over the next 10 years. They could have used that money to actually put Americans to work throughout the country. They could have used that money to invest in infrastructure, things like broadband that are extremely important. They could have used that money to fund a public health system that we're sorely lacking right now, to give a public option to the Affordable Care Act, or to start transitioning towards a single-payer system, but they didn't. They borrowed from the future of our children to pay off corporate donors now. So the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it's garbage. This infrastructure plan that the president put forward doesn't do anything. So what I would tell those folks, the 30,000 folks who look to lose their health insurance, I'm going to tell them I'm going to fight to get you single-payer health care systems so that way whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you have a job or not, you can still get health care and be treated like a human being with some dignity. On top of that, I'm going to help put federal dollars to help get you back to work, not so you have to wait for some corporation to bless you with a job, because corporations have proven to not always have the interests of their workers in mind, which is why some folks still only make $7.25 an hour. Thank you.